Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hello, I'm Larry.
I'm Dr. Frank J. Esposito.
I'm Ali.
And I'm Josh. And today we have, alongside Larry and I, or between Larry and I, two very noteworthy people. First is the distinguished professor of history at Kean University. He was also lieutenant governor candidate to Chris Daggett. He was a very instrumental figure in the creation of charter schools in New Jersey, and he has met and spoke with members of the Kennedy family, and that's going to be very helpful in this discussion. Dr. Frank J. Esposito, it's an honor and privilege to have you back.
Thank you. My pleasure being here.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And we're very flattered that you actually showed your first discussion about wit and wisdom from Poor Richard's Almanac to students of your class. Mm-hmm. So we thank you for that. And also on the panel is my great friend from school, from 5th grade to freshman year of high school. We have both been enthusiasts for U.S. presidential history for quite some time, and he aspires to become a casting director. Ali, welcome to our panel.
Thank you for having me, Josh. It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. So we are going to be going over a book about the JFK assassination called The Last Investigation. What insiders know about the assassination of JFK, which was written by Gaeton Fonzi. And Dr. Esposito is very passionate about the subject of JFK assassination. He talks about it in his America in the 60s class, and if you brought it up in any of his other classes, whether it be American Revolution, History of New Jersey, even if he taught Italian cooking, he would probably be happy to devote time to the JFK assassination. And Ali, to put your casting director details into account, who would you cast in a movie about the JFK assassination?
Yeah, I was going to say, for the JFK, I don't want to sound sheepish, but I was going to think of Matt Damon as JFK. The reason, I know he said he turned down Robert Kennedy because he felt there was going to be a lot of pressure because he is from Massachusetts, and like he doesn't want to feel like he has that burden of messing the role up. But I think what was kind of good about that idea was because he is from Massachusetts, and that's how like Good Will Hunting all was good. I mean, it won so many Oscars and stuff, and it was supposed to be a PG-13 movie, but he knew the area of Boston so well, and like because he's from there, and like he was from that area, from Massachusetts rather, and they always use the F-bomb, so it was impossible to have that. And so, I mean,
doesn't matter if it doesn't fit on paper. There's usually a negotiation that'll take place where the chances of Matt Damon being JFK in that consideration, in that possible situation, is likely.
The one flaw, though, is probably by the time if we made it, he may get a little too old for the film just yet. He may be a little too old by the time it would be made into a film, but he doesn't look terribly far from him either.
I think that's so.
And then what was it? Yeah.
If Leonardo DiCaprio can be J. Edgar Hoover, I'm pretty sure that Matt Damon could be JFK.
And then there was some others. There were like Josh Brolin. I just saw it like with McNamara. He looked so much like Josh Brolin when I was actually seeing pictures and stuff. And like Sicario did really well. Did pretty well. So I figured he possibly has the talent for there. And then I just think of others like Lee Harvey Oswald. It was not a big name, but someone young that worked with Matt Damon in the past as well. I thought like there was a guy named Colin Ford that because he's a connection. That's the big thing about the entertainment business.
I think it's better that they can portray the villain more than they can actually then have the big name.
Yeah, and then that's the thing. And then I was reading through Jacqueline Kennedy lookalikes, you know, and I was finding, I think it was like Emily Ratajkowski I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. I think we'll begin with the book, The Last Investigation, which concentrates a bit more on the people that participated in finding out the answers to the assassination, and doesn't necessarily concentrate on these the figures that you would think. It concentrates on them as the raw answers, but the story itself concentrates on members that were connected to the CIA, particular people that Fonzi spoke with. And the discussion starter that I have, I want to begin with going down the line, and I want each panelist to respond. What has reading this book done to your position on the Kennedy assassination? Has your view been changed, strengthened, complicated, or was it not affected whatsoever? And we'll start with Larry.
Well, I've long been a skeptic of the official story, and so I'm going to say that no, it didn't really impact me. Maybe strengthened a little bit to understand, you know, how involved and how many roadblocks there were for people to overcome or try to overcome. So I would say probably strengthened.
Okay.
There really are two major schools of thought in terms of how to approach the Kennedy assassination. One is try to deal with the key question of who killed him, who's really responsible. The other is really where Fonzi, I think, sheds a lot of light. And the other is why wasn't the investigations, why weren't the investigations, why wasn't the investigation of the House Assassinations Committee that Fonzi was a high-ranking staff member of, why didn't they follow all of the leads they had? And what I think impacted me most about Fonzi's writing is that he was really no holds barred. He said in there, and he of course is since dead, so we can't interview him now, but he said there that there were many opportunities for the House Assassinations Committee to go further. And in particular, look at the major connection between the CIA and the Mafia, which I think many people know is connected with what was called Operation Mongoose, where the administration, the early Kennedy administration and the end of the Eisenhower administration, there was a working relationship between the CIA and the Mafia. And it was targeting foreign leaders, and of course the most famous or infamous was the targeting of Fidel Castro for assassination. So why this is important, I think Fonzi points out with evidence, is that it's never really fully addressed by that House Assassinations Committee, that they really don't deal with it head on. And they see the flaw, and he points it out as well, the flaw of the whole thing is the main source of information for their investigation and for the Warren Commission investigation is information coming from the CIA. Now, if the CIA, which by nature is an operation that's clandestine operation, no, it's a secret operation that they operate in many, many fronts around the world, how can you do an investigation of any link they have with the Mafia that's a clear investigation without challenging them and really demanding cooperation from them? And that never really was happened. Never really happened. And part of the problem was it didn't happen because the CIA would continually say, this is all we have and this is what we want to release. So the The problem is, even today, is that we have about 15,000 documents that haven't been released related to the Kennedy assassination in different quarters. And a lot of them are intelligence documents. So Fonzi does a great job in highlighting that as part of the last investigation, as is the title of the book, the investigation fails because it doesn't go far enough.
Mm-hmm. And Allie, has this book, what has this book done to your position?
On the whole JFK, well, to be honest, I've been looking at so many books and so many movies about this whole entire topic. Mm-hmm. It's not quite about this book, but what I just really know is that this whole thing is a big, it's still a big mystery that no one could ever solve. It's no clear-cut answer. It's the one thing I do agree is that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the lone killer. That's the one thing. That's the one thing that I'm positive about. There was so
very few people would attest to, or very few people would believe that he's the one.
Yeah, and it's just like I was reading more, or just like there were so many. Kennedy made so many enemies over the years between like Cuba, the Soviets, and just
the mafia. The
and,
mafia.
Yeah, it was just
the mafia, that was his brother. Really, the mafia was the one that helped. They were contributing factors to helping Kennedy get in, and when Bobby Kennedy went after them, it was it inspired them, or it encouraged them to go forward with.
You know, and I feel like, well, the CIA, tampered with it. They were working for someone. I'm sure they had someone. I mean, the Warren Commission, the FBI, they immediately just blamed it on Lee Harvey Oswald without really further evidence. It's just all, it was all cover up. I think I hate to sound blunt or like vague, but it could be just that this might have been destiny for a lot of. It could have been a destinational. It's just like he was just because of all that, and I was off topic about it, but I mean it could have been his integrity was off too, because I was thinking, he had a lot of affairs, with other women, and I think because I think of like the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky instance, they were questioning Bill Clinton's, and it was even close to impeachment. It was very, very close to impeachment for him.
Well, it was impeached.
It was impeached.
He was impeached,
but it wasn't
like
impeachment
was the
process.
process. From office.
Yes, and it was just like I think of little stuff like that could really go far ahead, and I mean that's just a small. I'm not saying that's the case, but there was a lot, But it just questions integrity on top of everything else that all the fighting in Cuba, the Bay of Pigs, in the Soviet Union, and really going to Vietnam is like.
Yeah, that was a lot to. I think there was a lot. That's why Johnson. There was a good chance he had his hand in the deal as well. But with regard to the last investigation of the book, I was always like everybody on a panel. I was always. I believed in the conspiracy theory, and that it wasn't. I didn't believe in the lone gunman. But this book gave me even more clarifications, and I don't think it's the fact that they couldn't solve the problems, or they couldn't solve the assassination. They didn't want to. I think that there was this sense, the major players that were orchestrating everything from behind the scenes, whether it be the CIA or anybody else that was involved, didn't want. They had more to lose than they had to gain with the answers involving the assassination, and I think that I got a clear understanding about both the Bay of Pigs, which was a great failure in Kennedy's administration, which was shadowed by his martyrdom that he took from the way he presented himself, and post-assassination, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, which he pretty much was going against the anti-Castro Cubans and going for, he was standing to the, on the side of the dictatorship of Castro and the Russian rule of Nikita Khrushchev, because it was the idea that he was he was in a position of, he was in somewhat of a position of weakness because Khrushchev seemed like the kind of person that could have started a nuclear war, and in a way, Kennedy was keeping America safe.
Which made him very unpopular
It made him
with the
unpopular.
anti-Castro Cuban community
Yeah.
and the mafia, who
Mhm.
lost all of their hotels and their casinos and all of that in Cuba.
Yeah.
So they wanted war, as did the Joint Chiefs of Staffs. You know, the Joint Chiefs of Staffs actually, in meeting with Kennedy, there's a videotape of it that's available, actually wanted him to attack Cuba.
Mm.
They almost unanimously wanted an attack, an actual physical attack. They didn't want what Kennedy did, which was to promise that he would not invade, the United States would not invade
Yeah.
Cuba, which is what the Soviets wanted.
Mhm.
So that made him really a target for so many groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually came across a poster that was it was dated the day before his assassination, and it posed him as being a traitor and potentially posed him as a communist sympathizer. But he wanted to do so many different things, not just from the end of, not just from stopping the nuclear war, but the whole idea of him not wanting to be involved in Vietnam. That angered the establishment that felt that there was opportunity, and he angered people that helped him get into office, which he and his family pulled a lot of strings. Primarily his family, because Kennedy was nothing. He was one-term senator, if that. But he had a charming personality, and he had so many great ideas, and he was willing to speak and go against the establishment that was Johnson and plenty of other people that were just looking to keep their jobs and get reelected. And those are the people that are still around orchestrating in the interesting. One of the interesting pieces at the beginning was during the first the Warren Commission, Arlen Specter, which is a name I very much recognize. You remember when once Obama got elected in 2008, Arlen Specter switched parties. But Specter did whatever he needed to do in order to keep his job. And he was the one, he intentionally was framing it so that the lone gunman theory was the truth, and the Fonzi caught him in a contradictory on that one.
Not only Specter, you're right, Specter was a major force in promoting the idea that Oswald alone did everything, which is really, I think, fallen by the side now with most recent investigators. Said there's no way Oswald did what the Warren Commission claimed. Josh, it's important to know the connection with the Nixon administration.
Yeah.
You know, in the Watergate tapes, Nixon makes a statement that you can hear. It's part of the released sections of the Watergate tapes, where he says to his special assistant, Haldeman, he says, maybe we should pay that money that E. Howard Hunt is asking for his legal defense. But Nixon says, it wouldn't be right, but maybe we should consider it because he may, we don't know what he'll do, he may blow, this is the exact quote, blow the lid off the whole Bay of Pigs thing. And Haldeman later is asked about that because the tape becomes public. And he says what Nixon meant, and he knew Nixon better than anyone. He said what Nixon meant, those were the code words for the Kennedy assassination, that Hunt might blow the lid off the Kennedy assassination. Now, of course, what we know about E. Howard Hunt, he was a lifetime CIA officer, publicly, everyone.
Yeah.
You know, well, he wasn't a clandestine operator. Is that Hunt was one of the chief brigade leaders for the Bay of Pigs. But Hunt also, before he died, did a confession that is on tape, that his son tape recorded, in which he said, I was part of the big event and the planning for the killing of John Kennedy. I was a bench warmer, he said, but I was part of that group to plan the killing of the president. So here's a man who went to prison for the Watergate break-in. He's one of the White House plumbers, clearly part of the Nixon administration, who makes that kind of a statement. So the CIA connection, again, he's a CIA officer, to Kennedy's assassination, certainly is worth even further investigation.
Kennedy went after the people in the CIA too, which it wasn't really going to go well with them. They would have their due.
He said publicly, I will tear the CIA into 1,000 pieces. So that's pretty direct.
Yeah,
he fired Allen Dulles. See, and one of the real bizarre things here is that he appoints, if Johnson appoints Allen Dulles to the Warren Commission. This is the fired CIA director.
Yes, no conflict of interest there.
No, not much, right?
And they said Fonzi was a conflict of interest to the committee that he was appointed to, House Committee, the House Assassination Committee, because he was a known he was pro-conspiracy theory, if you want to call it that. But another interesting name that Fonzi constantly harps on is David Atlee Phillips, who went under. It was almost. It's pretty much fact. There was at the very end of the book, his wife got a confession from the Antonio Vesiana about the fact that David Atlee Phillips was going under the name Maurice Bishop, and under that name was interacting with Lee Harvey Oswald in the months leading. He saw them together in the months leading up to the Kennedy assassination, and Phillips then took a position in the CIA as a key figure in trying to put the pieces together. So that's a huge red flag.
Sure, yeah, I mean, the CIA involvement, I think, is undeniable. I mean, at least in the cover-up, maybe in the crime itself. I believe, I mean, they wanted war in Cuba. There's no doubt about it. They had the Operation Northwood, right, which we know about now. It's been declassified, which was the idea of actually staging a terrorist attack in this country and blaming it on Cuba. That never came to fruition, but was talked about. So I think it's pretty clear, and you know that's all available now. The papers are available. You can read about that if you haven't. But I mean, I just feel like there was definitely motive there, to say the least.
They're a subjective source. You would want, if you wanted to actually solve the Kennedy assassination, you would want somebody who is objective and to bring in people that there's no it's not even it's a matter, it's a common sense principle, but I think that we've learned that the way things go when it comes to the establishment and authority, there's no such thing as common sense. But,
of course, there's a recently released letter from J. Edgar Hoover. I guess it was released about a year ago as part of that first information dump of files and records, in which he says we better strive to make sure that Oswald is known as the assassin. You know, that the public has to understand that Oswald is the person. So it was clear right from the beginning that with both Allen Dulles and J. Edgar Hoover on the Warren Commission, the fix was in. It was going to be, regardless of the facts, it was going to be Oswald did it, and he did it alone. Now, what to me is very dramatic is Gerald Ford's admission before he passed away, shortly before, to the press, that he asked the person, the naval artist who was drawing the entry wounds for the Warren Commission in a drawing as to where they were, he asked her to change the entry wounds from the real photographs of Kennedy's back to move the shot that Kennedy got in the back just below the right shoulder, to move it to the base of the neck. And his explanation was it makes it more consistent with our theory. But it wasn't true. I mean, if you look at the undoctored photographs that exist, that we believe are undoctored, it shows that the shot that allegedly is this magic bullet shot is really in the lower back, lower shoulder area, not back area.
That's the complicated one, because there were three shots. There was one that did, or three noteworthy ones.
Three audible shots.
Yeah, one didn't, one missed
Possibly
completely.
Yeah.
The second one was the one that made it through, it went through Kennedy and into Connolly. The
Yeah.
lethal one went right through his head
Right.
and shot, blew his head off.
Right.
So, but, yeah.
But can a sharpshooter, he was not an expert marksman, Oswald, he was a sharpshooter, can he take a cheap mail-order rifle from World War II era rifle, take it and fire 3 or 4 shots with a bolt-action rifle that we now know had a faulty sight, that would require the shooter to re-sight before each shot? Could he have gotten off 3 shots the way the sound, the audible tape shows where the sounds, right? And done it so quickly, because if you listen to the sounds, you hear boom, boom, boom. Now, okay, the boom could be a shot from the cheap rifle, but when you're bolt-action rifle, you're reloading, you're re-sighting, because the sight wasn't working on that rifle. You're re-sighting, and then you're firing boom, boom. It's impossible. It's impossible with that rifle to match those sounds. So it means that one of those 3 sounds, at least, was from a second weapon.
Yeah, and the time too. He made mention to the different frames.
Yeah.
He would have had to do that in 5 seconds.
Right.
It would have had to take
Right.
5 seconds for the shot from the complicated shot to the lethal shot to take effect, and it doesn't add up, especially angles too, because if Kennedy, if the car was here, the building was to the side, and I'm pretty sure that the lethal bullet came from the back. Yeah, that doesn't add up. You'd have to have lightning speed, and I don't think that's a superhuman strength that Lee Harvey Oswald possessed. So.
And if you are Lee Harvey Oswald or anyone else in the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, and that car is coming, making a turn off of Elm Street, coming into Dealey Plaza right below your window, because your window's on the left side of the building, the shot you would take is right when it's below the window, which would be a very easy shot to kill the president. Why would Oswald or anyone else wait until the car gets way down the street going to the triple overpass by the grassy knoll before firing? It makes no logical sense. Why wait? It only makes sense if you say there's a triangulation shooting, that there were shooters from different locations firing at Kennedy, including the grassy knoll.
Yeah. And one of my great speculations was never necessarily the background of Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, it is, but more so the background of Jack Ruby, because because Lee Harvey Oswald, he himself admitted that he was nothing more than a patsy, and Jack Ruby shot and killed him 2 days later. We know he was a nightclub owner, and there was speculation that the two of them were actually together with one another, with other anti-Castro Cuban rebels. But the only one that ever had an interview with Ruby was a journalist named Dorothy Kilgallen, who was well known for being on What's My Line as a panelist. And once she believed there was a conspiracy theory, gave an interview, and then she was dead 2 years later, and they have a file of hers in the FBI. It's a bit of a digression, but it really adds to the complication of Ruby's place in the assassination. Fonzi doesn't touch up on it too much. He does make mention of the fact that somebody had information about him that he spilled out when he was intoxicated. But
Well, there actually is a brief news interview with him while he's in prison. He actually went to the courtroom and was taken back out, and the interviewer, the newscaster, said, "Is there anything you can tell us about what happened here?" And Ruby's response was, "The public will never know the truth about this." And then the news reporter said, "Well, can you explain what happened?" And Ruby said, "This goes to the highest levels of government."
mm-hmm.
This goes to the highest levels, he said.
Mm.
So who knows if Ruby had survived. Of course, he dies in prison. He dies
Years later.
after he complains that he's being injected with a substance that he didn't know what. But he dies rather quickly, allegedly of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So he's silenced, whether naturally from cancer or not so naturally,
Mm-hmm.
which follows a pattern of a lot of people.
Whether or not the
associated
people
with
that
this.
were within their, if they were a group of people and they were all disposable for a certain cause.
Yeah. Well, he was, I mean, Ruby was his name was Jack Rubenstein. He is mentioned in Robert Kennedy's book, written as Attorney General, called The Enemy Within. He says Jack Rubenstein has stolen money from the unions, I guess mainly the Teamsters Union, that was very complicit in a lot of these things, which may be why Jimmy Hoffa is still missing. There was a lot of corruption going on. Ruby was a conduit from the mafia to the unions in Chicago. So even Robert Kennedy, well before the assassination of his brother, knew who Jack Ruby was. So this was not an innocent guy who was just shooting Oswald to, as he said initially, to prevent Mrs. Kennedy from having to go through the trial. This is really someone who now we know from telephone records was in touch with the mafia leaders, just prior to killing Oswald. The telephone records show that. So he's associated with Santos Trafficante. You have Sam Giancana from Chicago. These are major mafia figures. So why is Ruby, this allegedly nondescript carousel club owner in Dallas, calling mafia leaders before he kills Oswald?
Great sense of speculation from all angles. Do we have any final thoughts?
I was listening, I found an interview that they did with Fonzi, and they asked him, what his takeaway was from all that. And he talked about a phone conversation he had with somebody after the book came out and everything, that he had worked with, as far as part of the investigation, who was at one time very passionate about the investigation. I forget the guy's name. But he talked to him again because the guy had stopped looking, and he asked him why. And the guy told him that the reason was because of the fact that the people that were responsible for killing JFK, the most important thing that they wanted to do was to send a message. And that message was that they're the ones that are really in charge of this country. Because the reason he said, is because the way in which it was done right? Like we were just talking about how Ruby died and how suspicious that was. We know that the CIA, according to testimony in front of Congress, had weapons that, well, there's actually a gun that they invented that they could use to shoot you, okay? And it would just leave a little red mark on you, but send a needle into you, and then release a poison that would be undetectable and cause you to die of a heart attack. Mm. So the way that they did it, so in your face and so, you know, kind of obvious that the story that they gave was not lined up. That was the true message that they wanted to send to the American people. That you know, we can do what we want, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. And that supposedly is why that guy, that particular individual, stopped looking into it. And I guess he just became too cynical. Mm-hmm. But I thought that was an interesting thought. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just say we haven't talked that much about Oswald. And to me, Oswald is really the quintessential mystery in this whole thing. Mm-hmm. Because when you read about Oswald, you're not sure who he's really with. And he seems to be a classic double agent or a triple agent. He's a man who the Warren Commission portrays as this kind of low-level, uneducated guy who doesn't drive and takes buses everywhere and just is like very poor and, you know, a kind of no-account person. The reality is Oswald spoke fluent Russian. When he was in the military, he had top-secret naval clearance, top-secret clearance at Tsugi Air Base in Japan, which was the air base where U-2 planes were flying over the Soviet Union. I mean, he spoke fluent languages. I mean, he does not fit the description that the FBI and the Warren Commission tried to have of just this guy who decided one day to kill the president, must have hated him. It's ridiculous. How he's a man who defected to the Soviet Union, then came back, who married the niece of a KGB official, lived with him for almost 2 years, lived with this official. So who is Oswald and who is he working for? We also are pretty sure now that there was a double. So Oswald, in all his activity, may not be Oswald. It may be someone else.
There were people, wasn't there someone that went under Leon Oswald, Lee Henry Oswald?
Oh, yes, yes.
So complicating made it even more. But I think there was definitely strings that were attached. Yeah. But I don't think that it was by no means a one-man show or by any means one man orchestrating the show. I don't think Lee Harvey Oswald was the one that was. I think he was a footman, but not to the point where he was the leader. How would we rate this on this book on a 0 to 5 scale with half stars permitted? Larry?
I'm going to go 3.5 stars.
Ready?
I would give it a 5 for what it does what it intends to do.
Mm-hmm.
I could give it, yeah, I can give it probably around like a 4. I mean, it does give some good details, but it's just like I said, it's just a very up in the air, elusive idea of everything that could have happened. But
I would give it a 4. I do think that Dr. Esposito has a great point where it does what it intends to do, and I think that there's moments that really clarified and cleared up things that I was thinking and believing with actual information and Fonzi's account of being hands-on with the investigation. But I think that there were moments that could have been a bit more concentrated, but I still think that I got a lot out of it, and Fonzi's very straightforward. I think that he doesn't hold anything back. But if you're interested in checking out the book, here's a copy of The Last Investigation. This one also includes in addition to a preface by his wife, Marie, it also includes an epilogue that he included himself in 2008, and an afterword from his wife, Marie, which primarily is her saying that Antonio Vinciano did make a written confession to the fact that he knew, that he speculated that he had evidence that Maurice Bishop was David Allen Phillips. But Dr. Esposito, this past last year, you came out with a new book with Dr. Regal, Dr. Brian Regal, that you brought up in our previous discussion about the Jersey Devil.
Yes, it's called The Secret History of the Jersey Devil, How Quakers, Hucksters, and Benjamin Franklin Created a Monster.
Wow.
So Johns Hopkins Press, and the book has been doing pretty well, we understand. And probably because of the Benjamin Franklin connection that we discovered that very few people really knew that Benjamin Franklin may be the major reason why we have a Jersey Devil legend for New Jersey.
And
I've never heard that. That's interesting.
It definitely is.
I'm
And
gonna
I'll leave a link down below to where people can find and possibly buy.
Great, that would be wonderful.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on once again, Dr. Esposito, and definitely plan to have you back on, Allie, for this season. We definitely want to have you back on if the time, the work, and the circumstance presents itself. You're always welcome on the panel. And Larry, you'll be here several times. But be sure to join us next time on another episode of Gladiators. For now, keep reading.